and similarly red button to pause.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Today is March 26, 2009, and I'm interviewing Nimrod Frazer at his house in Montgomery, Alabama. And his birthday is December 10th, 1929. And his current address is 663 Cloverdale Road, Montgomery, Alabama, 36106. And I'm Shelby Davis, and I'm interviewing Nimrod Frazer, and my mom is taping it, Cheryl Davis. And he was in the Army in the branch armor, and he was a lieutenant, and he served in Korea. I guess we can start with some about when you grew up. So, where did you grow up as a child?
Basically Montgomery. In the elementary school years, I was in 6th grade in Houston, Texas during the war. My mother was there. And then my high school years were in Wilcox County, at Darlington, Alabama, and I went to high school at Camden.
And did you always know you wanted to be in the military growing up?
I was always very interested in it. My father had served in World War I, and had been in a famous regiment, and so I was exposed to it at an early age. And when I was in high school, I joined the National Guard when I was 17. So all during high school, I was wearing a uniform and attending drills.
And where did you go to college?
I went to Huntington College here in Montgomery for 2 years, from 1948 till 1950, and when I dropped out and joined the National Guard unit that was mobilized in 1950 for the Korean War, and served for 3 years in the military, and then I came back and attended Columbia University for 1 semester, and then returned to Huntington and completed my baccalaureate degree here, and then went to Harvard Business School, where I completed the program for Masters of Business Administration with an emphasis in finance.
And what were you doing before you joined the military? Just in college and high school?
Yes, I was in the National Guard during the high school years, and a little while I was in college, but I finished a 3-year enlistment and got out and was working a couple of jobs here in town to pay for my college, and then when the Korean War came up, I re-enlisted and went on active duty with them.
And why did you decide to go into the military again?
Well, the Korean War was on, and I would go to the library at Huntington College and read about it in the newspaper and in the magazines of the day, and I thought there was something big going on. And I was broke and tired, and had been studying for a long time, and I thought this would be a great adventure, and it was.
What did your family think about you going off to war?
About the only person in my family who influenced me at that time in major decisions was my mother, and she thought it was a splendid idea. She was always very supportive of what the military could do for a man.
How did you get to Korea after you enlisted?
Well, it was a long, torturous trip. I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and took infantry basic training. Following that, I was sent to a squad leader school called Leadership School, 3rd Army Leadership School, also at Fort Jackson. It was a rigorous 8 weeks squad leader school for enlisted men. I finished that, and then there was an instructor at a Division Non-Commissioned Officer School at Fort Jackson, interviewed for OCS, and went from there to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I was in the first OCS company that they had during the Korean War. And I stayed there for 6 months of rigorous training and completed that, and then went to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and joined the 44th Tank Battalion there. Excellent tank battalion, had M4 tanks. They sent me down to Fort Benning to parachute school just as a part of orientation for being in an airborne division. And I returned from that and was a platoon leader there in the 44th Tank Battalion, and decided that I wanted to get into the war. And so I went into the battalion adjutant and I said, I want to get on the pipeline for FECOM, Far East Command. He said, well, you better go to lunch and think about it, because if you come back after lunch and tell me, you'll be clearing the post tomorrow night. And I came back and I said, I'm ready to go. And he said, okay, go pack your bags. And so they gave me a month's leave. And I spent that here at home. And my brother was in New York going to Columbia University. I spent part of it with him. And then we had visited other friends, and then flew out to Seattle. Got on a ship, went to Yokohama on the ship, spent 2 nights in Japan, and I was on a plane for Yangdong-po, and got there to a replacement depot, which was an old schoolhouse, until they accumulated a bunch of officers, about a dozen second lieutenants filtered in, and then we were all sent up to the main line of resistance and put in various units. I went into the 40th Infantry Division and was sent to the 140th Tank Battalion, and M46 tanks with 90 millimeter guns and 50 caliber machine gun on the turret. 5-man tank crew.
And
I had 5 tanks in my platoon. I went in as a platoon leader.
what were like the living conditions over at the war?
When I got there, I actually arrived there on November the 11th of 1952, and was sent immediately to the mainline resistance. I was there from November 11th until the 23rd of December. It got very cold. There was not a lot of hostile actions, a little patrolling, but not in some sniper fire, but no great danger, no great excitement. But it was cold and tough, and that was my introduction to living there. And I was from November 11th until December 23rd. Didn't get a bath.
Whoa.
So, you know, that's, and often didn't get hot meals. You know, living off sea ration. Very difficult. It was a mountainous area, very difficult living conditions. We had a bunker that we would sleep in, and we would alternate. During the night, you'd be on watch 2 hours, off 4 hours. So you always on a rigorous watch and rest schedule for all during the hours of darkness. During the hours of daylight, we were much more relaxed, and we tried to maintain the vehicles, but it was cold. They were in bad shape. It was not pleasant, and had some snow during that time.
So did the cold like make the vehicles not work well?
Yes,
Is that...
yeah. The vehicles, it would get so cold, and you'd have to, if the engines really got locked down cold, it would be hard to start them. And as a consequence, we try to run the engines a lot to keep the batteries up and to keep the engines warm. It was a constant 24-hour-a-day fight to
So,
do that.
like, about how cold was it?
You never knew. Nobody ever had a thermometer, but it was real cold. And during that time, on my birthday, which was my 23rd birthday, I had a couple of men with me. We were walking out. I wanted to set up another position on a flank. I was very nervous about the security and safety of the position. And I took these guys with me. I said, come on out here, y'all come out with me. I'm going to go see if we can find a place where if we need to, we can set up a machine gun on the flank. And I was walking out there, and the sergeant was behind me. He said, Lieutenant, he said, you just tripped a mine. I said, what? and there was a wire across the path, and I tripped it, and the wire rolled up like that, and it was a big Chinese stick grenade that was down into the ground, and the wire went from the stick grenade across the path to a tree, and I tripped it, but it had snowed and it melted and frozen, and the firing mechanism didn't go off.
Wow,
Otherwise,
lucky.
I might have been a double amputee right then and there.
Wow.
So what type of weapons did y'all use, like compared to today's weapons?
They were not nearly as good. We thought they were pretty good. The best I'd ever worked with. A 90 millimeter gun was a big gun, flat trajectory, high velocity. You could do a lot of damage with it, but these guns had been fired so much that the mechanisms in them were worn, and there was a lot of slack in what you call the traverse to the right, to the left, or the search up and down. And so you'd have to put Kentucky windage into the sight reticle. When you would look down the sight reticle and you'd see the crosshairs, you really didn't put the crosshairs on the target. You'd know what that gun would do. You'd have to put Kentucky. So the equipment was badly worn, and the tanks by that time had gone to the Yalu River and back down to Busan and back up north again. So these tanks had been all over Korea by the time I inherited them, and the maintenance on them was tough. They were always breaking down.
And what kind of weapons were the North Koreans using against y'all?
At that time, the North Koreans were using really only mortars and rifle fire with us. Snipers, they'd have like a 30 caliber rifle, and the mortars they were not using the mortars very much because they had terrible resupply problems as well. They would have to bring their mortars up, their mortar rounds up on somebody's back. So they didn't shoot. They didn't do a whole lot of shooting, but they had like a 60 millimeter mortar and a 120 millimeter mortar.
And you said it was really cold over in Korea, but
that was during that winter. During that cycle.
Winter. Who are the main commanders that you fought under?
A guy named I.D. White was 10th Corps commander. He was pretty well known. He'd been a combat commander for General Patton. In that particular unit that I was with when I joined, there was nobody related to that who was particularly celebrated, but then I went back and was given another assignment for a while and worked somewhat with Captain George Patton, who was General Patton's son. He was a 26-year-old captain at that time. He's dead now. He became a lieutenant general, and he was really an extremely able person. He would be the most celebrated of the people, and he was really a splendid officer. He was knowledgeable, courageous, never asked anything of anyone else that he wasn't prepared to do himself. So I would say that George Patton was, who was the son of the famous World War II General Patton. I would say he was the best officer that I served with there.
What was the American attitude towards the war?
At that time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it certainly wasn't supportive. There was not a lot known about it. Television at that time was not reported on television at all. And the whole time that I was in Korea, I never saw one single reporter or one single photographer, so that I would say that the home folks didn't know much about what was going on over there, other than beyond what they were told in letters from people like me. I felt that, we were doing some real tough duty, and the nation was ungrateful for it, and I think that would be a correct statement for the times. However, I also believe that it was the most significant thing I ever did in my life, because we, the guys in the Army there, and in the other branches of the service, gave freedom to South Korea. But for us, it would be an enslaved nation now, just like North Korea is. And it has freedom of religion, it has democracy, a democratic elected government, it has capitalism, it has all of the qualities that we hold near and dear to us. And we gave that to those people. And there are 54 million of them now.
Yeah, and it has become an industrialized country, now because of that.
Yes.
And just examples like the Hyundai plant being here, probably
right.
that would have never happened.
They're very energetic people, they're good people, but they would have gone another way but for us.
What do you remember some of the battles that you fought in?
Well, that first operation was not very dangerous and was not really active, but it was a hardship. It was bitter cold. And I stayed there from November 11th until the 23rd of December, came back there. Then we did some training cycles. We went to a place called Dodge Range, got some new men, got some training, got themselves in better shape, and then went to a place called, I was sent to a place called Luke's Castle, L-U-K-E-S, Luke's Castle. And it was a Hill 812. And I was on that for 42 days, and I had 3 tanks up there with me, and there were a total of 18 Americans there, and we were with a Korean rifle company. And it was a position that was a point out protruding into the North Korean position. So we had the enemy on 3 sides of us. It was dangerous. We were fired at every day with mortar fire and sniper fire. Had some casualties among the Americans there. It was also a place of great hardship. Again, no bathing for 40 days, except we did have a stream nearby, and if you had a clear day, you might go down and brave the cold water and bathe somewhat there, but it was, the food situation was better. We would get a hot meal every night, but it was tough duty, and these guys would all hated it. It was very hard. And then a third operation that I was in, we came back from that, and I went back and commanded a training operation for a while, and then there was another big offensive. 812 fell in this the place where I had been 40 days after I was rotated off it. It fell, not necessarily because I wasn't there. It might have fallen had I been there, but it fell, and the North Koreans captured that, and then I was back in another area, and I was sent then to the next hill over, which was 755. And it was a big fight there. It lasted about 13 days. They were trying to take that hill, and it was. I had 2 guys with me who were killed, my tank crew, and there was a considerable amount of danger. We again working with the Republic of Korean Infantry, so that was always a problem. Language was a problem. It was not like working with an American unit. There was a great deal of uncertainty, and I was a senior guy there. And by that time, I was the first lieutenant and knew the business a lot better than I had known it when I first got there. And I was there when the war was over.
So the South Koreans fought, like they had units fighting with y'all?
Yes, well, the other way around. We were supporting them. They were holding the line, and they didn't have any big flat trajectory weapons, and we took our tanks up there and supported them with our tanks. And same thing, we had an American artillery battalion supporting them. They never would have made it but for us. But they took a lot of casualties. When I was there with them, they suffered as well.
Were there any Chinese troops in the unit?
In the first position that I told you about, on the northwest corner of the Punch Bowl, the mountainous area there, the Chinese were opposing us there. They were all Chinese, the ones that we were We were right next to Heartbreak Ridge, which is a name that was famous at that time. We'd see the battle at Heartbreak Ridge every night. You could see the traces being fired back and forth. And they were all Chinese, and they would patrol into our area, and you'd see their split-toed shoes and the Chinese clothing and that kind of thing. We'd see them also. You'd see them. So yes, we'd see the Chinese. But in the other operations at 812 and at 755, that was against the 45th North Korean Infantry Division, and they were very tough. Didn't take prisoners. We felt that they were a lot harsher and a lot more primitive and a lot more deadly than the Chinese.
And did your mission change from when you first arrived in Korea? Like the mission you had when you arrived, did it kind of alter to be something different?
Well, we kind of went through that.
Yeah,
when he
we
went
kind
through
of go.
his
The
missions,
first
yeah.
time I was just in a defensive operation. It was bitter cold, not a whole lot of action. And then at 812, it was a lot of action and a lot of patrolling. And then finally they took that position, but I was not there when it fell. But a number of soldiers that I knew were killed in that operation. And then the third operation was in defense of Hill 755, which we held.
And how did the war influence your life after, like, coming back?
It influenced it and still does influence it. I would say that it was the greatest responsibility that I ever had. I was glad to get out of it, very grateful to be out of it. Kind of shut it out of my mind for many years. And I was a motivated student. After that, I came back and got a baccalaureate degree and then got a master's degree, and I was very, very motivated to do well in school and to have a business career. But always, the precepts of the Army would tend to stay with me. You take care of the person who's senior to you. You please him. And then you take care of those who are junior to you, who are working for you. And if you take care of the people above you and below you, the system will work. And that's pretty much the Army system, and that's what I've always believed in.
And how was life like, did you feel that your life was different from being in the war? Like you were saying, you take care of people.
Well, I just am grateful all the time that to have a bathroom, to have a warm bed, or when it rains, to not to have to be in a bunker that's leaking water and it's in a wet sleeping bag. I mean, the physical hardships were harder on you than the danger. I never thought for a minute that I would be killed. I always was absolutely sure I would survive, but it was such a long, arduous ordeal. It actually was only 10 months, but I mean, you go for a week would be like forever, and you would be tired all the time. You couldn't rest, and you were always responsible. Somebody was always not doing what they should do, wanting you to tell them what to do. You were always having to check, and so it was a never-ending responsibility.
Yeah, I know you told me before, like, that was so hard in your young life that things you had after that didn't seem so hard.
Absolutely. I mean, this just
Yeah.
the physical luxuries that we have and live with. I'm grateful. I don't need a luxurious lifestyle, but I mean, it's just getting by, just having clean clothes, clean underwear, clean socks. We'd try hard to do that. I mean, what we would do there when you're in a combat situation, about every 10 days or 2 weeks, a truck would come up that had a lot of clean clothes on it, and you just would give them all of your dirty clothes, and then you'd go through these others and find some that would fit. Now we had in the winter we would have a good parka, for example. But one time we had a bunker that caught fire, and we had half of our parkas and half of our sleeping bags were destroyed. So we would have to take turns. When a guy would go on watch, he would give me, I'd give him my parka, and when he'd come back off watch, he'd give it to me and I'd wear it on watch. And the same thing, we were sleeping in each other's sleeping bags, so it was not good.
You take so much for granted over here. It's just like, makes you grateful to think about those things.
Yes, and it wasn't all a constant hardship like that. I don't think people could hold up under it if it was all like that. There were times when you were in raid areas and it was safe and you were just training and it was routine and the food was good and you were given 3 hot meals a day. But you tend not to remember that part. You tend to remember the hardship.
And do you have any contacts with the veterans from the war that you knew?
A few. I belong to my battalion association and have kept some connection with it. It's not close, but it's meaningful. I belong to the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I belong to the American Legion, and always will.
And what were your most memorable experiences?
The most memorable ones, the ones that stand out, are those combat experiences that I told you about, being at 812 for 42 days and being at 755 for that big 13-day battle. I also remember my wonderful 5-day rest leave that they flew me over to Japan, and after I'd been there 4 or 5 months, and I had a good time there, and really hated to go back. It was hard to go back. I often wondered if it might not have been a mistake to give these guys these rest leaves, because you don't quite have as much fire in your belly after you've gotten out of there and had it easy for a little while. So the toughness is important. You know, people who are going to be in danger have to get used to living with danger.
Do you have any lasting injuries?
No.
You don't. My mom told me that you visited the demilitarized zone in the past recently, and has it changed a lot?
I've visited it twice. I've been back twice. I've been right back to those. I couldn't get back to 755. 812 belongs to the North Koreans now, and I couldn't get to 755 because it was restricted. But I did go and revisit the area where I was at first in that cold, rather staid time on, but I went to a position where I could take a battery commander's scope, a very high-powered telescope, and look over all the terrain, and it was amazing to me that some of the ditches and some of the erosion in those mountains, just like I remembered it 50 years before. You know, it absolutely has not changed at all.
How is, you said that the South Koreans probably couldn't have made it without the Americans to come help them.
No question about it.
Yeah. I know that war isn't like a fun thing, and I know you're proud you did it, but it's just, I think it's a good thing to be involved in life.
Oh, absolutely, and the world is perilous now. It was perilous then because we were in this thing with Russia. That was all. This was just a sidebar with Russia. But it's perilous now, and we definitely need a strong standing army, and these people in the military, I'm very, very grateful to them.
That's all the questions that I have, but if there's anything else that you wanted to say.
No, I just think that we did a wonderful thing when we saved South Korea, and I, of course, feel that I hope that history will believe that it's a good thing when we have saved Iraq, if we have saved Iraq. Afghanistan is so primitive, I don't think it's worth us sacrificing a lot of American lives to save it, but we simply cannot live as an island. We simply have to be involved as a matter of national policy, and we're the world's most powerful nation, we're the world's most privileged nation, and along with that goes responsibility to our own people. We've got to protect our own people. We've got to have a strong national defense. We've got to have oil. These are these things that are necessary to keep our economy going. We've got to have somebody that's capable of defending them. So we will never have peace. We will never have a world without the poor. I'm pretty sure of all that. And but I also have encouraged my own children to serve. 2 of my 3 sons took infantry commissions and served 3-year tours and definitely benefited from it. I have grandsons that I have encouraged to serve, and they have not wanted to do it because I think they are spoiled and not tough enough, and they don't want people yelling at them and having to go through what I went through as a matter of course. It was a part of my training. It made me, for better or worse, the man that I am today. I was shaped in great measure by that experience. As an enlisted man, going through officers training, and then having the responsibilities of leadership.
Yeah, Shelby's uncle did 2 18-month, my brother did 2 18-month tours in Iraq, and he was in that first, offensive 40-day trek. Yeah, he was in the tank platoons. He was a captain, and he did that 40-day trek across the desert when they attacked Baghdad.
Where is he now?
He is at Fort Drum, New York right now, but also Shelby's cousin, my nephew J.D., is in Marine training, and he is studying, he's like in this very rigorous training to be an anti-terrorist in the anti-terrorist group, and so, and I'll tell you, it has made a difference in him. He has grown up and become so mature and so confident and so capable because he's had to endure things, and it's just taught him a lot, And we should be grateful for people who have served in our military, because that's the only reason we still have a free country.
It's changed so mightily. There were just no women in that world. I remember when I saw a woman nurse at a MASH hospital that it was in a rare area. I couldn't believe it. It was just like golly, And now the role of the women is they would be. I was in Iraq last year and at a brigade headquarters where there were women were running that thing.
Yeah, Shelby's great aunt, who's like about 90 now, was a nurse in Germany in World War II.
Yeah.
So.
What grade are you in?
The 10th grade.
10th?
Yes, sir.
That's a good year. All right, well, I'll get you the papers, and I'll get you a picture. And if you got any other questions you want to follow up on later after you start writing that up or something,